Welcome to the Crazy Creative Podcast. This is Steve Raboin, and we have a special episode today. We're trying to Google Plus Hangout record. It's a live broadcast. It's being broadcasted straight to my YouTube channel. I think this is going to be a cool way to get some people on the show, like my boy Mark Figueiredo from Maryland right now.
Yeah.
He's a designer, and I asked him to be on the show. What's happening, dude?
Technology. We get to do really cool stuff like this.
Yeah, I'm super excited that this is even a possibility. This kind of like in my brain is allowing me to kind of think of like, who else can I get on the show and not like limit it to people like directly in my 20-minute location.
It's a technology that's out there. I mean, especially with Google Hangouts, it was one of those deals, right? When Google Plus came out and everybody was like, ooh, new shiny toy. And then you get into it and you're like, nobody's on this. And then now they're doing a cool thing, it sounds like, where they're breaking this all apart now. So like Google Hangouts, its own thing. Google Plus, it's its own thing. So it's pretty neat. So I like that they're trying that stuff out.
Definitely. I think it's cool that they're kind of finding their way within social media more as like a tool. Like Facebook and Twitter are cool for like, sharing funny and cool things. But this is actually something that we can apply, working and communicating, which I think is actually more interesting sometimes.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think it's good. Like you said, you get to actually reach out and not touch somebody, but talk to somebody, see their face more than you would before. So, and a lot of this technology too, because we're in the same master's program. So a lot of these technologies and things that a lot of this I'm learning as I'm going along, to be completely honest, like, different programs that we're using and stuff like that from Adobe, and how to use Hangouts and Skype for these calls and communication.
And down in New Haven, it was like a Behance portfolio review with the Digital Surgeons as an agency down in New Haven. And like one of the parting thoughts from the owner of the agency was like, it doesn't matter where you are anymore. You don't have to be in New York City or LA to be a great designer or a great anything anymore. Like you're not limited by your geotag. You can be awesome anywhere, and technology is really helping facilitate that.
Out there that you just follow on Twitter or whatever, and they're in Japan, and they're Americans. They just moved to Japan and they're doing design out of Japan because that's where they want to be, or just traveling the world with a laptop and Wi-Fi, and they're and they can do anything they want to do in your own business. But I feel like that's a certain kind of person, it's I don't know that I could leave and travel the world and design like that, but
a lot of confidence to kind of think, that's what I'm going to do. And especially to travel around the globe and do it. That's even a second layer of confidence, like, to leave like the employment, safety net sort of is one big jump. But then to be like, I'm going to leave the borders of the country is like, if you have a heart attack,
you're going to be broke and you're going to live in the gutters, but you're going to be in our
right. You're going to be a heroin mule. You just finished, right? So,
of course, the Advanced User-Centered Design. Those courses are honestly why I took that program. Few things that I liked about it was that it was all online. For me, I went to school later on in life. I was in radio for the first 5 years out of high school because I didn't want to go to college. I totally just did everything I could not to go to college. Didn't seem like my thing, so I went into radio broadcasting. And then by the time I started in college, I was 25, 26. And by that point, when I started my undergrad or middle of it, I already had a kid. I was, so I was the in class. I had a kid. And it wasn't like I was like married. Mark, come on.
Undergrad and same scenario. I didn't have a kid yet, but it's funny when you going back to school when you're 25, you're definitely like all about the business and getting to hell, whatever, dude. You can party and get drunk. I'm gonna get a job when I leave here.
And that's exactly that was my whole deal when I was in school. I mean, I'm proud to say now, as weird as it is, like I hold a 4.0 GPA. Like, like that's proud when you're paying for it yourself first of all. I appreciate it. I was in radio for 5 years. I loved it. It was everything I wanted except for a paycheck. I don't even know. I think when I broke it down one time, it was kid. When I think back to it now, this is pre-computers, and it was like, okay, I was doing stuff on Etch-a I remember one time he was like, oh yeah, I can throw that up in AutoCAD. And I have no idea what AutoCAD was at the time. On your screen, you know, in computers. And so he was always the kind of guy that was like, you can't break this. And so like I would mess around with the computers and MS Paint. And, you know, I remember, you know, you have those moments in life when you see stuff and you remember it. I was watching Dr. Wizard back in the day. Do you remember this guy?
Maybe a Dr. Wizard isn't ringing a bell.
Yeah. I don't remember, but I remember him doing something one time on a computer, and all it was scrolling, right? But he was like, I'm going to make this rocket ship, you know, blast off. And all he did was, well, you know, now if I did that, I'd be like, what? Like now I'm building, I was building my own websites and stuff like that. I did a local music show while I was working on a rock station, you know, built my own site. I've had some experience. I was in like high school bands and stuff like that with my buddies from rock bands, and we would build our own sites, and, you know, we had 3 Angel Fire accounts because that's how many times we changed our band name. We're all and, you know, and just promoting ourselves there. So I grabbed a lot of that and took it with me, and always liked it. But it was always kind of like, well, what am I going to do with that? Like, can you really make a living? Like at that point, like designing websites, it just was beyond what I thought I wanted to do anyway. Like, how do you make a life as an artist? You know, people who are like your first guest, you know, he's, you know, first of all, awesome podcast. He was hilarious, and, you know, yeah, but like,
great. Yeah, that guy doesn't give a shit. He that dude keeps it real.
He does. Doing like his art is amazing. Those wood carvings. Like when I actually, you know, looked it up afterwards, I was like, man, this is. Thought about design, to be completely honest. I was like, how do you make money with this? And, you know, I don't know. My next steps from there is, again, young kid, you know, it was what, 21, I guess, living in Ocean City, Maryland, which is kind of, you know, that's the beach for Maryland. And, you know, and there was a guy, I was working down at Secrets, which is a nightclub down there in the AV department, you know, just messing around, doing stuff on there, visual graphics and stuff they did in the nightclub, just kind of learning it. I was interested in it. It was cool. And there was a guy, I don't even know how it all came to be. He did some like fashion show in this nightclub one time, and for whatever reason they talked about us doing the video editing for it. And this was my first time on a Mac, first time with any kind of programs, whatever, and I was doing a good job. You know, I was learning on the job, and he came up, he was like, I want to pay you $25 an hour and you're going to come work for me. I was like,
yeah, that's 21.
This nightclub. Again, I learned so much stuff there. It was great. I got to do working on the radio, doing like midnight to 6 shifts, which is what you do when you get into radio. And then during the day, when I wasn't sleeping, I was over at this guy's condo and I was doing video editing. But he was paying me, and, you know, and I was like, okay. And then at one point he's like, hey, I want you to work for me full time. I'm going to pay you $50,000 a year. And I'm going to send you to Miami Beach, Florida, and I'm going to let you live there, and you're going to open a shop and help me run my business. And again, 21 years old, okay. Some dude's like $50,000, and that's, you know, and I went and did that. It wasn't sustainable business, you know. Again, you know, back and forth to Miami, and my girlfriend at the time, my wife and I have been together since high school. You know, she was in college at University of Maryland, and I was driving back and forth, and this guy was just all over the place. And eventually I ended up in Bethesda because he was like, okay, well, things aren't really working out here in South Beach. I want you to open a shop. And I was like, okay, again, 22 at this point, opening a business, having no business. You know, I had this aha moment while I worked there, and I love this story because it really is. Everyone always laughs at me because it really was an aha dumb moment. They were like, we want to get these flyers printed. You need to call a printer. We need to get these done. And I called the printer, and again, knew nothing about anything. You know, I was like, colors can I use? And I was like, no, seriously, like, I mean, you know, black and red are our 2 colors. You know, so do I just pick like 2 other colors?
Yeah,
right. I really should go to school for this. And you know, I went to community experience, honestly, because I was in school doing graphic design, exactly what I wanted to do. You know, learned everything from Photoshop, InDesign, Illustrator, which was my favorite class of all time. Just a great professor for that. I built a realistic looking car, and I thought that I took some psychology courses, and I really liked that. And I was like, whoa, what is wrong with me? Like, I avoided this since I was 18 years old. I did not want to go to school. I thought core classes were the dumbest thing in the entire, you know, it turns out that I liked a lot of those things. And then now it's funny looking back, psychology is exactly what I kind of do now, except in web, because now I've moved in the user experience now, and that's exactly what you do. You figure out what makes people tick, and that's what I like about it. about it.
And he focuses a lot on, you know, the experience and how users interact with the product. And he went to school for psychology, and he says it's actually very interesting how what he learned in psychology actually applies to, you know, think and interact with technology.
I went to school and got an intern college for was a community college, and then I transferred to Stevenson University, which is in Maryland. And again, they had a visual communication design program that I followed along with. I went in there. The professors were great. I still keep in touch with all of them. I actually go back there. They have portfolio reviews that they do every year for the seniors, and I'm on the when I do that.
Oh yeah, I saw that. You post something like that. That's cool that you're still like
really kind of give you a good outlook on what you're doing, and they're interested in showing the kids and the students, you know, what it's really like out there. You know, art school. And I say this a lot when I'm doing those portfolio reviews, is like, you try not to be rude. I like critique. I think critiquing is an extremely important part of the process. But there's just certain things where you're like, that looks art school. And I found myself saying that, you know, there's some stuff that looks super professional, and then some stuff that looks like art school. And you know, when you bring people in and you talk about that, and the school does a lot. They have a lot of artists and residents that come through and things like that. And they tell you what it's like, you know, and you get this wide range of different people, and you see, oh, here's a guy that started his own business, and here's a guy who, you know, works in house, and here's video. And then I didn't even know what user experience was, honestly, until we had one artist in residence come through, and it was Jess3. This guy Jesse Thomas owns his own business in DC, and he came in, and his whole thing was all about prototyping, rapid prototyping, these cool ideas and information that he would do. And I went to this, and it was the most amazing thing ever. I was like, dude, how can I do this all the time? And he was like, we have this idea. He kind of gave us like a brief, like creative brief. And he's like, we're going to spend the next 10 minutes, and every minute you're going to sketch, and then you're going to change your idea, and you're going to sketch, and you're going to change. And I was, you know, we're all just blazing through this. And it wasn't at that point, it wasn't even so much about like, oh, think about the usability. It was like, just create the most wild thing, interactive thing you want. And I was like, cool, like this gave me an idea, and I kept in touch. And it was Black & Decker at the time, and now Stanley Black & Decker, you know, doing like basic production.
Web production?
It was mostly production. So I was, it supported the sales team that was there. So I learned a lot about kind of how things worked, a lot about branding, you know, CSS, some CMS stuff, like, I want to say we did like Drupal or one of those deals. I reverse engineering is weird to me. That's why I still don't like, I appreciate WordPress and what can happen there, but it was weird for me starting with a template and then trying to reverse engineer that.
PHP course. It was kind of a nightmare. I kind of mailed that one in because I was like, dude, I'm going to breaking everything. I was like, I don't want to touch anything, you know, PHP, JavaScript. I was like, oh, I don't care. I want to make the point. You don't even have to.
It's a different side of the, you know, I thought in school, I had to do everything. I had to design it, you know, and
they kind of teach you in school. You do like every nook and cranny and every little detail of every piece along the way in a project. And a lot of, you know, that works most of the time in the print world, but definitely not so much in a digital world. Yeah,
well, and then I realized that afterwards, and that's why a lot of people, I go to these things and I'm like, so how much you know about digital? And they're like, oh, I don't do digital. I only do print. I'm like, so you don't have any experience, you know, even designing anything for the web? Not really, because I thought I had to be a web developer to be a web designer. Now you have, you know, you're into like so many different like technologies and channels.
Yeah. And it's like, you're a graphic designer, we need a web designer, but you need to know like all these languages. And it's like, yo, like who knows all of this stuff?
I have a web developer friend, he does. No, but that's what you kind of figure out, is that you can start to break that down, and you don't have to be a jack of all trade. There was a podcast I was listening to that had a guy from a startup, and you know, he was talking about, you know, when he did his startup, you had to be a jack of all to start to grow, or, you know, and then he realized like suddenly they needed to start specializing, and he was such a generalist that he couldn't work there anymore. You know, like
you kind of have to be a generalist until you specialize. Let's say like if you're going to start your company, okay, maybe you're doing everything, but once you get big enough that you're hiring people, like you need to hire specialists for each job role if you're going to move forward and like remove yourself from doing everything.
Yeah, and I kind of did that at Stanley. I mean, eventually, like I said, I started off in production. I was, I had my eye on digital. There was a very small digital group that existed at the time. They were just starting. The business wasn't even fully aware of what they were doing. They thought it was just websites and social media, and that was early social media that we were dealing with too. And I started just weaseling my way in there. Hit up the guy, which is actually one of my best friends now, this guy, James Ballard. And I was like, hey, how can I help? Eventually, something opened up and he knew I was interested. And I was like, yeah, let me go ahead and do that. Wanted to be there. And, as a contractor for a while, worked with him. He taught me, a good amount about what was going on. And, I got to do a lot of emails and email development and kind of be a part of that process and some social media stuff at the time. So I learned a lot real quick. Then it was until, again, by that point I had a second kid and I was like, or about to have a second one. I was like, I really need a full-time job. I was a contractor. I want to feel like a part of the family. And
okay.
I really.
Sorry, when you say contractor, you mean like were you there on like a freelance basis, or were you there as like a temp through like a creative placement?
Negative kind of connotation. I've worked with people who are like, you're a temp and we're designers, and they treated you like a temp. And it was like, that's not how you want to be treated at a place. You want to feel like the family. And to me, agency in Columbia, Maryland here, again, first time at an agency. I thought it was going to be Mad Men, but it wasn't all the time. I really was kind of thrown in there. I met some of the most amazing creative people I've ever met in my entire life at the agency. And these people were agency people. They, have been to numerous agencies. And some of them really took me under their wing. There's a point when I was there where I really got in like a design rut. I didn't know what that was. I thought, how can you ever get in a design rut? And I actually was like questioning myself as a designer at times. Called me up and was like, dude, like these contractors we're bringing in, this is not working out. Management flipped a few times. He's like, we've got this new person in. She's really cool. What would it take for you to come back? And I was like, okay. And I gave him some terms. He made it happen. And I went back and it was really cool. And I got to work with these great people. And eventually he moved on to a different group. And I tried to step up, managed a creative group. Yep. But all those before, like, please start new with this group. We had new management, new people in. And my manager at the time, she was like, you build this team. And I was like, okay. Cool. So I knew what we were doing and what we needed. And, I hired a general, like, a designer, kind of a production designer. And then I was like, I really need a front-end web developer. And at that point, like I was doing all the development. And again, CSS, HTML is what I knew, but I knew I wanted more than that. We put out the job and, this great guy, Matt, came in and was like, I didn't know too much about front-end web development. Again, I was only used to what I knew. And so I hired him and I had this team of 3. And, we were running everything for 5 brands. And cool. It was a lot of work, but it was great. And then I hired another guy that actually up in there in Connecticut at the Stanley one that's up there. And, so here I was, a guy who'd never managed before. So my manager took a leap of faith with me and was like, okay, you're going to make this happen. I'm a goofy guy and I like to make jokes. And, and that's something you sometimes can't do in business. So I learned a lot about how to like hold that back and be professional. It's hard for me because anybody that's worked with me knows that I like to make snide jokes all the time, sometimes inappropriate, but work. Segmenting that stuff out, like I said, and I was like, okay, you're going to do front-end web development because that's what you like. Great. The other guy wanted to do, he was more production based. He wanted to create the graphics and he was really good at that. And I just ran this team as this group. And I was like, all right, we got to make this happen. And as a whole team, a digital marketing team, we grew really nicely over time to the point where I got to focus on strategy and a little bit of user experience, like dabble in it. This is next steps. And again, here's the guy that never wanted to go to college. Suddenly looked at master's courses, right? I was like, I'm going to do this.
Dude, we're in the same boat. It's so fun because and like I was like the kid who got solid C's and like slept in the back of English class and like, if you went to any of my high school teachers or kids that went to high school with and told them I was getting a master's, they'd probably like, really, that dude? Like that was like the laziest kid I know.
It's amazing, but when you figure out what you like and suddenly you see how that works, and I think now too in the job, we'll call it a conversation. Every now and again, especially when I was looking at when I was not wanting to go back to school or do whatever. And she's like, in design, like any job you get, you need an education. You need an education. It doesn't matter. But sometimes it's about experience. And I say that to for design that do not have a master's degree that are doing really well in design. It's
you can kind of go either way. You can focus on trying to get the experience through a formal education route, or you can hustle and get that experience through, luckily through somewhere, you get picked up or hired, or you do your own stuff. But it's like one way or another, you kind of have to like the biggest reason why I went with the Quinnipiac program was because I feel like I was closed off doing all this print work that I wasn't going to make the jump to the digital world with. And I found this program. I was like, this might be my next thing that'll get me to the next level. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And you're doing all kinds of stuff.
I think the result of still after a grad program, I still don't think I'm a good digital designer, but I think I'm a good communicator, and different light bulbs are going off in my head. Okay, if everyone's gonna go and try to develop apps and websites and learn all this other shit, I'm gonna do something different. I'm gonna do a podcast because nobody's doing that.
No, but podcast on the internet, you're the first one. This is kind of go with the flow of the trend. So you've got people who will dive into one thing or the other. You have to find your own deal. And what you said, kind of, you're a good talker, a good communicator. That's what I kind of figured out. My entire life was kind of this natural leader. Not that I want to or need to be in control. I can work in groups, but problem solving. I like talking to people and understand them, right? And that's both in personal life and that's at work. And that's why, again, user experience, kind of your user or who your customer is in the most deepest way. How do you interact with something? So same thing, meeting with businesses and clients and talking to them about their needs and their wants and presenting to them. I'm able to do that. I don't get nervous in front of people anymore, which is funny because going back to broadcasting, I gotta find it somewhere. Sort of in a box down here in my basement. But when I was in broadcasting school and started, I could not talk in front of people. I remember just shaking like a leaf, almost sort of like vomiting because I was write something you're really bad at but want to improve on. And I forget what I wrote on the front that I was good at, but on the back I wrote public speaking. I'm afraid of it, I'm terrified of it, and I really want to get better. And the next thing you know, here I'm in radio, sitting in front of hundreds of people, introducing bands, for stuff, and not having a problem with that. And now giving a lecture about digital design and stuff like that, or getting up in front of people who make zillions more dollars than I do and presenting to them an idea that myself and my team came up with and we're trying to sell in.
Skills, I think, more than our skills as designers is actually how to communicate to people verbally and speak to crowds of people and not be uncomfortable. And that's kind of something I'm kind of getting more into, actually. I've done a couple lectures recently, and I think it's definitely helping in doing this show and talking to people who I normally wouldn't talk to. And then like this past Saturday, like I said, I went to that event and I was meeting, the creative directors from ESPN, Lego, Colangelo, AIGA, all these kind of heavy your portfolor. And I honestly didn't even I wasn't even prepared at all. My buddy works at the agency, and I was like, dude, I didn't even bring anything. He's like, your website, let me borrow a laptop from the office, and I pulled up my blog, and I was just in the podcast, I'm like, this is the bullshit I've been up to. What do you guys think? And they're like, that's pretty cool.
Yes, because I just switched jobs. I'm working at Rowe Price now, totally different than working at a power tool company. Now it's now I've got to figure out why people want to get into mutual funds and retirement and stuff like that. Why they were interested in this role and interested in me possibly. I didn't have an online portfolio. I let that die a while ago because for me, I always thought these online portfolios had to be about always showing your work and keeping things up to date. And I have a family and I have kids and I'm working full time. When in the world am I going to have a website, right? Die after a while because I was I have a full-time job. I don't need to worry about this. I put together my portfolio on an iPad, and I found this really great app that just kind of lets you, put it together and create this great presentation. And then I talked about my work. I was able to coherently describe what I did, my thought process, why I did it, and then the result of that, whether it was, you know, something about analytics or if there was dollars tied to it, you know, and people
used
on this, I have it like in Dropbox, because it was really great. And I would,
he's like, oh, well, I don't know how to design a website, or I don't.
Yeah, I call it minimal folio.
Minimal folio? Okay,
Yeah.
cool.
App box, you load all these images in here, it populates in your app, and you swipe through it up and down, you know, so left and right, up and down. And for me, so one thing about design I always liked, especially web design, is storytelling. Creating, and here's what I did, here's why I did it, and, you know, taking people through this. And it obviously worked. You know, I got the job, and I'm super excited about what I'm going to be doing here. I'm only a month old, so it's not like I have a lot to talk about, but work-wise with it yet. But it was just like, I didn't have to have an online portfolio. People were like, buddies of mine were like, you're not going to get a job without an online portfolio. I don't, you know, how are people going to look at your work? And I was like, dude, we work for a global company. Like, this is on the internet. Our work is on the internet.
Yeah.
So I links, some descriptions, and it worked out. I know that's not the best way to always go about it. I think more and more, depending on what you're doing, a portfolio is good to have. People want to see what you do. But I don't know that it's always has to be a portfolio in a way of like visuals and your work. In your case, like, you're like, here's my website. Write hilarious articles. Like, that's one of the reasons I think that I was like, oh man, this guy's pretty cool, is because it was in that one class. I forget the way to make up those different names. Yeah. Like, okay, to come with a topic to write about. And I just remember like thinking, okay, I'm gonna write about technology. And then here's this guy in here, no idea. We've been in classes before. I think we figured that afterwards, but it was the darkest, hilarious stuff about like parenting, which I connected about.
I did BCK sort of angry dad type blog where I kind of, you know, I hadn't slept in about 3 years and was just basically pitching about the experience.
And of most of the people in that class, I enjoyed reading your stuff the most because you have that, right? But like, those are things you can put in this portfolio. You're a designer, but you've also branched out so much more than just visual design. It's communication at this point now.
I think of myself too as like, I don't want to be like pigeonholed into just being a designer, because you see things like 99 designs or 99centlogo.com, and it's like, I don't know, like, I feel like some people, designers are not valued, man. And like, eventually all of us, like, a designer is going to be replaced by like a team of 10-year-olds in India. So like, you have to be a creative thinker and a content developer for any media, because like, you got to think like, okay, yeah, like Facebook and Twitter and websites are hot now, but what the hell is going to happen 10 years from now?
Yeah.
Like, think about how much the internet has changed since like the iPhone. Dude, you can't even calculate the next big thing. You'll be all right. I don't want to waste time, learning a language that might be dead in 15, 10 years,
You kind of figure out what works for you. But I have an interesting thing when you were saying about like these logos that come out for 99 cents. And, as a designer, and anyone else that is a designer, they know about, you've got those friend and family discounts that you do. My wife volunteers me a lot for stuff for her. I'm not looking to be a freelancer and money off of that. But you are. It's like, oh, that can just take him a second to do, right? And I'm like, well,
you just Photoshop
it. It's thinking up ideas and kind of going through it, and there is a process to it. And I think that's one thing that is undervalued, like you said, is the thought process that goes into the things before you do them. I have to do that with user experience right now. And anybody who is a user experience designer or a designer, even, I mean, with a design, you can go through a thought process and you right? If you are doing a logo, you thought through it, you have a process, you have something to physically show. With user experience, a lot of the stuff that we're doing is not visual or fully visual in nature. Some of it is basic research, it's setting up these, heuristic evaluations and understanding best practices and how users experience something. And then most you're going to get a prototype or a flat wireframe, right? Because you're just trying to understand.
Yeah, right.
And people who don't
design, is it relatively new? I feel like it's kind of like a hot topic recently.
Yeah.
What user design is like, briefly.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think even user experience on an app or a website, like I'm working on the underline of that, why you're interacting with that, why why it's placed there, and we're doing the research to figure out the best stuff for this. I mean, user experience design as a whole, it's basically you're trying to improve like usability, accessibility, and the pleasure of working with something.
Okay.
And it's
the real world beyond.
Right? And you just use it. You expect it to work. Well, think about these people who have thought about every nook and cranny of the iPhone, the way it's shaped, the way it's held in your hand, all of that. So all this, what went into creating the iPhone. When he talks, you're just like, whatever you say, Johnny, you are the leader. But he forever pencil. If you've ever used anything where you're like, I don't like this, like this Magic Mouse, right? Like there's people who hate this thing. I actually recently just switched to a trackpad, which people are even more like, dude, like, how do you even use that? But it just works, and you figure it out, and it's all about how you use it. I mean, if, think about regular mice and how we started off with those, and they get better and cooler. And, somebody said, I don't want to have to scroll by clicking on the scroll bar and taking that down or up. I want to, use my finger and use a rolly ball, and it's really everything.
We're kind of trying to develop go through a rebrand. And they're like, oh, we're going to update the logo and the website and the tagline. And I'm like, well, I brought up, a rebrand, really, you should consider everything, like the signage, the entrances, what the look like, and how they treat people when they come in, like these things, like the kiosks when like people so that like when all right, you can put up this beautiful website, but if like your retail location looks like a pile of shit, like it's not going to matter. You have to make the whole thing a consistent look. Like you were talking about Apple products, the iPhone is sleek and beautiful, and then you go to an Apple store and it's like, oh my
sleek
God,
and beautiful.
Design too. It's like from nut to butt, everything. Crazy person, like, what are you talking about? You just put up a new logo and a new.
Black & Decker recently redesigned their logo and their whole experience, and I was there for that. They used an agency. I think that's the same thing too. Being an in-house designer, working with agencies, a lot of the time that gets like a bad rap, right? Because you're like, oh, someone's on my turf, they're coming in here. But through what that was, we didn't have the resources or really to do that. A little bit, you understand, you do some user research, but they went through and they had they had storytelling about what it was and how you interacted with it, and the story the product told. Again, we're talking about mowers, and you're talking about string trimmers and drills, and you're trying to make this an adamant object have a personality. And the logo, it's the packaging, it's the email you get, it's the social media director without the title of creative director, but it was like, okay, 3 social posts going out this week for something for a brand. I knew we were doing an email, and we were also working on the website. So there's no reason that those things shouldn't look the same, feel the same, the buttons, things like that. It all makes a difference. So like, people don't think that, thinking about one piece of it, and that's why you hire people who know how to do
holistically the whole thing, man.
Yep. Absolutely. So so that, I mean, it covers everything, and and you are right. I mean, user experience is kind of like booming right now. Everyone's talking about it. There's even within the young community, a lot of people are discussing what's the difference between a user experience designer and a user interface designer. It's kind of the jack of all trade, right? Like you can make a living as a user experience designer and focusing on that and doing user research and user testing. There's a lot of people who do it, but honestly, especially in in-house places, you're not. You got to think about all that, do the research, and then you're also laying out the designs and working with that. But people are like, is there a difference? Yes, there is a difference. Well, what is it? And you're kind of like, okay. And there's all these different things on the internet. You got people who are like, okay, think about it as a cake. And user experience is all of the ingredients that go in, and then user interface is the icing and the toppings that go on top of it. And you're like, no, I want cake, that. And it's a thing, but you got to kind of identify with where it is. I know for myself, as I've developed as a designer and a creative, I started off just wanting to do design and understand design, and I respect design. I started fooling around with development and got only so far, not very. Guys that I've worked with that just write JavaScript like it is no one's business, and it totally makes sense to them, and they're all about writing SaaS and whatever is the new thing after SaaS. They just get it, and that's what they like, and those are the people you need on your team. You don't need to be that person, be the designer and the developer. Let a front-end developer be a front-end developer, and let them do their thing. Let the designer do their thing, work together. I think collaboration is one of the things that people don't like the idea of it, but when you have to hand something off that you've been working on, I think some people have problems with ownership, right? You want to hold on to something from the beginning to the end. And I think one of the biggest things I've learned as a creative is that doesn't always happen, and it's not bad that happens sometimes. Now, if you're having something taken away from you because you're doing a terrible job, yeah, beat yourself up about it, right?
Not so much don't want to pass it off. It's more like people don't want to get involved. At least in my experience, like, oh, well, I didn't have anything to do with that.
Because sometimes you need someone else to look at it. That's what,
you start going down the same path and you can't get out of it. You need that second set of eyes to kind of.
You do. And if they don't like what you're, yeah, well, exactly. And sometimes it is so much better. Again, it's all about letting go a little bit of control. When someone says they don't like something, you've got to make changes. I did it myself. There'd be someone say, oh, I don't like this, I want changes. And I would curse them out when they left the room. So I'm like, I know better than you, right? You get to the point where you're like, it's actually a good idea. Like, hey, yeah, let me go ahead. Like my wife does it sometimes. Again, she's an art teacher. She's amazing elementary school art teacher. Not a visual designer in the sense of what I deal with. And I'll show her things sometimes and she'll have these ideas. And I'm like, oh, why didn't I think about it? Oh, well, I know better than you do.
Oh man, that's funny.
But at work, you work with people who are project managers or whatever, and you think, oh, they're not creatives. They don't get it. Dude, what better person to look at something you're working on than someone who has no idea is like, I'm going to design this, I'm going to do the research and figure it out, and I'm going to present it to you, and I want to know how you react to it. And to me, what excites me is when somebody says, well, you know what, this really isn't working. Like, you ask them like, oh, what do you think you do with this page? And they're like, I have no idea. Or, okay, well, I want you to do this. And they scroll down and they don't click on the button you want them to click on. And you thought that it's nothing is cooler and more exciting to me is than coming out of that, writing up a report based off of a user test and realizing that, you know what, this really maybe wasn't the best experience.
Look at it positively. I can see like where a lot of designers would be like, well, you're stupid. Yeah. You don't get it. It's going to be.
A lot too. Being okay with that is just so important. And I think also, something I've kind of been stirring around with myself, and I kind of talk about it a lot, is that a lot of people think that it's all about being right and wrong. Like if someone says to me, no, do it this way, and I say, well, let's test it. When I say let's test it, I'm saying, no, let's figure out the best thing. If I'm wrong, then so be it. But I want the best experience for the user. I've worked with people who, again, designers or non-designers, that'll be like, well, I don't agree with that, I think this. And I'd say, well, the analytics are saying this, the user are saying this is what they like. And instead of being like, oh, okay, they'll be like, well, let's just A/B test it. I'm like, but what are we A/B testing? Like, you want to be A/B testing an interaction, something that I can track, not the image that I'm using. Like, that's not something you A/B test. Well, sometimes you can, but not all the time. Not on like emails, for instance, right? Like, I'm trying to get you to click through for something. Let's not argue about what's the right or wrong way because you don't like a creative element I use. Well, as that sounds, on flash banner ads, I did a lot of that at Stanley. We did a lot of flash banner ads, and it was just trying to figure out what works best because people are banner blind now. Like, when's the last time you actually like clicked on an ad that you saw, animated? Maybe because I'm in the business and I get it, but they're figuring out new strategies on how to do that. Like,
obviously from all your testing. And I'm actually kind of excited. I've been talking with like a CRM manager to really gather data to kind of like pinpoint, users, what users want, down to like, they could probably test images that users would more likely respond to favorably. And I actually am pretty excited about that because I feel like, at least as a print designer, a lot of times, in-house, I'm kind of forced to design things to, the desires of an administrator versus what a user might want. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah. It's one of those things, something I read recently, I forget the quote where it was exactly, but it essentially said, if you're designing something for business-centered design, think about the user in this case, not what color you like.
Data that we have that we could tap into. I think as designers, we can kind of like, use that as ammo to defend ourselves from, well, change that image out and put it in somebody else because I think that person's ugly, or I hate that color and I hate that font choice. Well, we could be like, well,
email or something, and my designer came back to me, or I went to whatever, and I was like, hey, are you still working on that? They're like, the hair off of his arm. And he was like, well, that's what they told. I was like, what? Like, this is an image that has already been approved. Why are we wasting time doing that? I'm the same way, dude. When we were redesigning the Black & Decker website, we worked with an outside vendor for that. I got to work with, again, some of the coolest user experience and experienced designers. Again, they opened my eyes to. I still keep in contact with them now because they're just cool. But they have the whole thing on this new CMS. We were using Sitecore is what we went to, and there's this whole implementation of the CRM that you can do, and it was amazing to me. And I was like, log in and serve up completely different information for a segment that they're interested in just based off of data that you've collected from them interacting with your site, or even with your emails. It was like you could start segmenting users by click-through rates on your emails that were linked, like creepy Google thing, right? Where like in the future it could be phase 2. I don't know when it's happening, but it should on all these sites. But it's things that a user doesn't even notice when you go to a website. I mean, like Amazon does a great job of that, right? Like off Amazon, and suddenly I go there and I've got a list of things that I don't know that I needed to buy, but they're already in my cart.
When you're looking at something else, you're like, holy shit.
Yeah, well, I remember someone was telling, a guy that I worked with, that he wasn't into the creative, but he was in like the business side of things, and he was getting like his MBA and doing all this great stuff, and he was talking about Amazon and saying that like, the stuff they're doing now with Amazon is like, if you look at something for long enough, you go away and you come back again and look at it because you're thinking about it, they'll actually ship that product to your closest distribution center because they pretty much know that you're going to buy it, and they'll ship it there essentially to get it to you even faster, so that like that experience is better.
Like your medical prescriptions are going to be delivered to your house via Amazon. Basically anything else you could think, like your groceries, you can set up an Amazon groceries list and have all your shit delivered by them.
They think that you're interested in. I remember at one part reading something that said like, oh, Amazon is going to start shipping you things that they think that you need. I'm like, well, no, I don't like that because I don't know that I was going to actually buy it. Don't charge me for something, whatever. But yeah, people who like set up, like, especially with kids, diaper delivery, like nothing worse than not having diapers or wipes.
So is pregnant like almost instantly.
Really?
Formula coupons, shit for like Babies R Us, like register for like instantly. I forgot. I'll have to find the article and send it to you.
Yeah, it's kind of the Internet of Things that we're going to get to that point. And it's, and it goes back and forth, sometimes, I'm all about technology, dude. Like I got a Pebble watch and I just switched my iPhone to a Samsung, which, again, that's like a huge debacle that I did that. But, I'm always looking for new cool tech, and I'm always like, this is the future. And, when we start talking about like future advertising, and again, I'm going to, I look something up online. Well, eventually we'll get to the point where my TV commercials will then be directed at me. So I'm not going to get a tampon commercial looked up, something online, and then suddenly I'm going to get ushered, because I'm watching Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., those commercials on things that I'm interested in, like buyers that, that all the time. I have to double think any kind of impulse buy now, because most of my impulse buys are expensive. It's like, I don't want an Apple Watch, right? I love watches. I love technology. I like Apple, but I don't want an Apple Watch. But they do such a good job of marketing that I feel like I need an Apple Watch. I don't. I honestly don't need an Apple Watch. But man, like they show me a commercial or I'm reading things about it, and I'm just like, I want it. I don't have one again, but I don't have.
Hey, there's a sale at our store.
Come to it, but still, you're like, it is. You go through, and it's really cool, and then it's really scary, when you think that there's that much information out there, and it's
information, but it's like, all right, well, they have information on everybody, so fuck it, who cares?
Yeah, well, it's the same thing. Like with fingerprint scanning, like my wife doesn't do that. Plus, she can totally do fingerprint scanning. She doesn't. She just doesn't think that's something that she needs to do, or Apple Pay, or any kind of, I'm pumped for like Samsung Pay to come out, because now they're doing, it's not just NFC, now they're going to be doing like mag strip, where I can hold my phone next to a regular mag strip and pay for something, like, and everyone's like, oh, the security, you're going to get hacked. Like, dude, I got hacked when I ran my Target card through the Target, credit card swiper months ago when they got hacked. Or not safe than using your phone or using technology to pay for something.
Right.
There's always going to be someone out there trying to rip you off. But what I like about that is companies see that, they know, again, it's like that user experience and user testing. Paying for something with your phone it can be scary, but there's a want for that out there, but you have to kind of accept it and do it. A friend I work with is from Korea, and she's like, this happens all the time. Like, this is old technology. Like, of her who buy their groceries in the metro because they're using QR codes on walls, and by the time that person gets home, the delivery person is bringing them their groceries, and it's all happening through their phone.
Online, I'm like, are you actually go to a bank? Like, when do you have time to leave to go to a bank? Like 2 in the afternoon or something? Like, what the hell? Like,
no, it's true. It's the same thing with like post offices or home phones. I have that conversation a lot with my wife. Like, she wants a home phone. I'm like,
I don't have a home phone.
Her mom called, because by this point, if I don't get a home phone, I end up paying more money with, if I don't get one piece, it's going to cost me twice as much. Okay, well then get it. Versus just using your cell phone, because you always have your phone on you. When people battle, I like that, like Samsung and Apple battle over who has the coolest phone, because it pushes them further, because the next phone, but now I kind of need a new phone. It's like creates a business of things. Then you're selling your phone online at a discounted rate so you can have money to put towards the new thing, and it's cool and I like it. But after a while, though, I think right now I'm starting to get like that with technology, where I'm like, maybe I'm oversaturated.
6 because I broke my 5, and it's funny because I'm like, dude, am I gonna have to buy a new phone like every year or two? Like, this is getting ridiculous.
Well, isn't it funny though? You think about that with cell phones. Like, I had that old Nokia brick, that everyone always.
Yeah. And you use it for shit to call somebody, because texting was stupid, because you had to like press each button like 7 times to get one